previous basket is under review.
Welcome back to Scout Team. The March to November 3rd continues. I'm Kevin Sweeney, joined by Eric Fawcett. We're fired up, and we've tried over the last couple weeks to start giving you some scouting reports on some faces you haven't seen already in college basketball, right? I trust that the people in this Discord, even if they're coming from low major schools or whatnot, they've seen the transfers at some point in their journey. But some of these freshmen, the film's harder to find. Obviously, international film much harder to find. The context is very different. And so the next 2 weeks, we will dive into the high school class. Next week, we will have I don't want to downplay this video. I was going to say a more interesting video where we break down some of the 5-stars who've gotten a little less attention, or not necessarily 5-stars, 5s and high 4-stars, guys who will play a lot as freshmen, who've gotten less attention, who could potentially swing seasons one way or another. But we did feel like it would be valuable to watch some film of the quote-unquote core 4 in this high school class. Darryn Peterson, AJ Debansa, Cam Boozer, and Nate Ament. Because, Fawcett, look, I think everyone agrees these guys are incredible prospects. This is a widely regarded to be an outstanding class. I know as you dove into some of these guys, as you haven't watched as much of them as I have just on the road and whatnot, I know you came away relatively impressed with all of them. They all, I think, have high ceilings, but also pretty high floors in college basketball. Like, Ament's the only guy that I could see a world where they're not like a very impactful college basketball player, which you can't always say about the top 3 to 4 players in the class. There's some guys who are raw, who will take more time. But they're not perfect players either, right? Like, these guys are still freshmen. They're still learning. And they all have things that college defenses will try to exploit. And so we are, I don't know if I'm taking the negative slant with this video as much as we're taking the swing skill slant, right? Like, the guy, if guys improve in this area, if they show strides in that regard in college basketball, not only could it help them in the draft, but it could help their teams pretty significantly push towards a championship in their respective conferences. But yeah, Fawcett, I guess just, before we get into it, any overarching thoughts on a couple of these guys and what they could do in college hoops this year?
Well, I think generally speaking, if you go back 4 or 5 years, I would say, just me personally, whenever there was a discussion about a top freshman or a number of top freshmen, I just feel like with everyone, I took the under. I don't want to say I faded everyone, but just generally speaking, if people were like, oh, this guy is a surefire 18 points a game, I was kind of like, well, I bet he scores 13. It was just, I kind of thought that there was an era where freshmen were very overhyped and they often fell short of it. And then last year, I'm like, oh man, are freshmen back? As Cooper Flag mania was there, I was like, well, he's probably not going to be as good as people think, just because that's what seems to happen to freshmen. Obviously, Cooper Flag was as good as advertised. And then even as you go back kind of down the recruiting rankings, which is also the reason why we're going to look at some guys a little bit more down the rings. I even think about you going down to like your LeBaron Philons and guys that were not as heralded, but played really, really well as freshmen and were very impactful in college basketball. So I think generally speaking, even last year reminded me, someone who usually just took the under on a lot of these guys, that there is a chance for these players to still be extremely impactful and be some of the best players in the country, even as college basketball gets older, brings in a lot more older talent through the European pipeline. And watching these guys for today's video, just again, the individual skill of players is hard not to still get wowed about it. Even though every year there seems to be big shot-making wings, this group still honestly seems like it might even be a little better than what we're expecting. Though at the same time, I will kind of say I don't like to be the, grassroots basketball is so bad and, these guys don't learn how to play. But while I watch more and more talented players, I still have more and more questions about how it's going to translate. And that is why I think our video here will be kind of interesting as we look at not just what makes these players great, but their swing skill, like you mentioned, that would take them from good to great, or their teams from good to, or from really good to competing for a championship, all that. But I think a lot of people have watched the highlights of Debansa and Ament and Peterson, all these guys we're going to talk about. But while we will definitely show some of those glorious plays, yeah, we'll point out some stuff that they might need to adjust.
Yeah, look, let's start with Darren Peterson, who I have been told by multiple scouts, grassroots people, etc., that he is the best guard prospect to come out of high school basketball, at least since Cade Cunningham. And I think that's reasonable, right? I know some people would maybe say Scoot Henderson. It's a different conversation because of the Ignite situation and whatnot. Technically, by recruiting rankings, the 24/7 score gives Nick Smith the edge, which is just preposterous. Like, I loved Nick Smith out of high school. It's preposterous to compare him to Darren Peterson. We did a video about him. I encourage you all to check that out. It's on the Basket Under Review YouTube channel, and all about his fit at Kansas. And one of the things we really pointed out was, yes, there's some unbelievable shot making talent, but some playmaking concerns. I talked to Darren this summer for a story that's coming out on Sports Illustrated here late this month. And he says he really feels like he's made a lot of strides in that area. But I do think, especially in the context of how Kansas is going to play this year, he is going to get pressured a lot. People are going to throw 2 and 3 defenders at him and force the ball out of his hands. And it will be fascinating to see how he manages that.
Yeah, when you watch these highlights, man, it is pretty easy to see why he is rated the way he is. And the talent to score in just a number of ways and make it look really easy is remarkable. And as you watch all of these highlights, it definitely looks like, wow, this is an NBA player playing at the high school level. And I think that that's something that you look at this and you say, how could this not be just incredible at the college level? And, you're probably right. And I do love, too, for a guy who was especially known a lot for some of his shooting ability earlier, the way that he does seem to always be going towards the rim is excellent, in the way that even when he runs into bodies, he just seems to find a way to get to the glass and lay it in with his length. Really love a lot of that. I do think you made the kind of best point talking about how Kansas is going to play and what is going to be demanded of him. What he's able to do kind of as a playmaker and making guys better around him, because, man, when he saw more aggressive coverages and pick and roll, when he saw traps, he did not make the best decision a lot of the times. And a lot of it was really just locking in. I guess like a quarterback in football, you would say he was locked on his first read. And that was often trying to throw the ball to the roller, which is really interesting because a lot of high school guys actually usually really struggle with getting the ball to the roller because there's not a lot of good rolling bigs to kind of hit. And then you saw Peterson really looking for it a lot of times, and you saw him either jam it in there like we saw in some of those clips and he'd throw the ball away, or he would see it wasn't there. He didn't have the next reads ready. He didn't know where he was going to go next. And he had some of these turnovers. Like you saw a couple there where it just seemed like he started lagging. He started to buffer, and then suddenly the ball was poked out of his hand. So definitely needs to speed up a bit of that processing and kind of reading a defense and knowing what his second read is. But as you talk about his skill and your conversation with him and what he was learning, I also think I watch some of these clips and I think about, well, what else was he going to do in high school? Like, it's clear his team, his coaching staff, like they wanted him to go up there and be Darren Peterson. And how many teams are really equipped to hard hedge him and trap him in ways that he wasn't just going to dribble and turn the corner and still get a layup. So it's one of those things that I certainly don't think, wow, this guy is not, there's no way he'll be capable of doing it. It's just another reminder of these guys don't always get the best opportunities to do that, even playing an elite high school schedule. And just the kind of the question of like, how quickly does he learn it? Is it at Kansas or is it going to be at the NBA level?
Yeah, 100%. Right. And look, I think he's wired the right way to continue to adjust and learn. And I think he's someone that his film in February in terms of how he handles some of the coverages will be better than his film in November. And that's a great sign. That's what NBA teams want to see. I'm not going to spoil the story. I think Darren, there's a lot to say about him. But I did ask him, I did give him the kind of classic, like, which NBA players do you really like to watch? Like, who are your favorites? And he said, like, I like to watch the best player on every team because I like to see how teams defend them and how I will get defended. And like, that was just I hope that wasn't like somebody who gave him that answer, because like I love that thinking. Like that's just such a great, it's just not something you think of very often, especially for someone his age, right? Like, oh, I think I'll be like, I could be like LeBron, I could be like Kobe, I could be like Durant. Like, no, like I kind of, he said he really wanted to watch everyone and get a sense of how guys get defended and how they react to that. And I think that is the type of kind of tinkerer mentality that I think will serve him very well in college basketball. But look, again, teams are going to hard hedge him. They're going to send two to the ball. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at him, because the ball in Flory Badunga's hands or Jaden Dawson's hands or Melvin Council's hands or Cole Rosario's hands is a lot less scary than the ball in Darren Peterson's hands. That's just the reality. And I think that will be a fascinating dynamic to watch. The other kind of dynamic ball in hand scorer in this class, and the guy who is number one for, I would say, the majority of the high school cycle before Peterson took him over, was AJ Debansa. And AJ, look, unbelievable talent. Exactly kind of what the NBA is looking for. These big wings with elite scoring upside. Has been very, very productive pretty much in every setting. Has found ways to produce in different ways in different settings, which I've always really appreciated about him. But it is going to be an adjustment playing in like a more structured college basketball with other good players, where the entire world does not revolve around AJ, right? And I think that will be a very interesting dynamic to watch, because, for the most part, like that's like what he's created throughout his high school and AAU career, right? And I give him credit. In USA basketball, he's been better about this, but like the ball was in his hands constantly in AAU, even when he was playing with Tyron Stokes. And prep school, he basically creates his own prep school, Utah Prep. It was the AJ show, for better or worse. It was fun to watch at times, but it was bumpy at others. And how he responds at BYU, playing with the Rob Wright, playing with the Richie Saunders, that will force him to be a more traditional wing and play off the ball, I think will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, really fascinating watch, because, man, the highlights are incredible. And the way that he's able to get to his jumper and use the spin. He's one of those guys that seems to like accelerate mid spin. So even if guys anticipate it, he still is able to get space off of it. And it really is remarkable. But at the same time, like, hey, if you're watching this and you want to start counting dribbles, I mean, good luck. You're going to need a calculator. And that's going to be one of the struggles, I think, as you look towards what does it look like at BYU? I mean, what did BYU do really well last couple of years? There's like, they had guys or last year, they had guys who could really cut, play off of pin downs, make good reads on reversal. Well, like, Kevin, I'd love to show you clips of him cutting. That's just not the case. And this is where some of the technical problems come in. You saw him travel there playing off the catch. Here, he almost travels once, definitely travels again. It's called. Watch this one again, playing off the ball as it comes to him. Kind of travels the first time. You see the official want to put their hand up and call it. They don't. And then they have to call it the second time because he obviously traveled. And then again, as you see, as bodies start running him, second defender start to run, he just runs away from it. And I obviously the shot selection, as you can see in a lot of these clips, it's going to be a challenge. But I even just think, again, just some of the, like, just technically speaking, he's played off the ball so little that when he did get a ball swung to him, it seemed like he was traveling every other time. And you saw from some of the clips there, that was just over a couple game span. So it's oftentimes we talk about the adjustment between a guy that's has the ball a ton in AAU or in high school. And we talk about, okay, what are the adjustments to like playing off the ball, being someone who maybe shoots a little more off the catch versus off the draw. Like there's like technical issues here because he travels a lot of the time when he gets the ball swung to him because he's not used to playing in those roles. So, the talent, the shot making is incredible. Like, as we even saw some of the shot making from like a Darryn Peterson, I even watched it from Debansa and I'm like, wow, he even created a little bit more space. Oh, he even looks a little bit longer. That touch looks a little bit soft. Like if someone wanted to even argue that Debansa was a better, I don't know if people are doing that in their recruiting space. Like, I can see kind of flashes in that scoring element of why Debansa could be the best wing scorer. But then you see some of the shot selection things, some of the playmaking things, some of the just like technical abilities playing off the ball. And there's problems there. So what does he do in BYU's system where they're really good at cutting? they're really good at playing off of screens once they throw it to a trail five, stuff that he is just not yet used to. And how much, and I guess the other question is he just so good that BYU's like, oh, hey, all this like really nice team-oriented offense stuff we've done, yeah, that's out. Now it's time to let Debansa cook. Like, that's going to be really interesting to see also.
Yeah, look, I do think they're going to really rely on their three super high usage guys, and that's AJ, Richie Saunders, and Rob Wright. I think you look at the rest of their roster, they went out and found lower usage players who could try to be essentially, guy you never run a play for, right? Catch and shoot guys, play finishers, screeners, cutters. I also think, look, maybe I am over contextualizing, but I wonder how beneficial, and I'm not sure this was AJ's intent in picking BYU. Obviously, there was a financial implication, a lot of other implications, play for an NBA, former NBA coach. Like, I think one of the best areas an NBA coach could help a player like AJ is becoming more efficient with his moves, understanding how to, get on and off the ball more smoothly and quicker, right? Like understanding when it's time to go hunt shots and when it's time to play within structure, right? Like, I think Kevin Young's probably a lot more prepared for that type of conversation than a lot of college basketball coaches, right? A lot of guys who've been around the game forever that have a way that they want to play that are a little more rigid. Like, I think that's a really nice marriage, and I'm really optimistic for that. But I also think there are going to be moments, especially when he struggles, that will be fascinating to watch, right? Because what happens when he's 3 for 9 with a couple turnovers and it's the second half? Like, does BYU take the ball out of his hands? Does BYU put it in his hands and try to let him shoot his way back into confidence, right? Like, I think that dynamic will be interesting. Again, probably easier learned about in November and December playing against weaker competition than it will be in the Big 12. And there will probably be some highs and lows. But as you could see on the film, the highs are pretty darn high.
Yeah, and for someone who is as big on efficiency and shot selection as anyone, of course, a lot of these guys from the NBA is that something that is well communicated to Debansa? Is that something that Debansa buys into? And then, of course, that's where it comes to, does he take those lessons from someone who's been in the NBA more than a college coach? That'll be fascinating. And that's one of the things too. It's like, you could not even watch the games. You could just look at his shot charts through 5 games. You could probably have somewhat of an idea of how he's acclimatizing to BYU and college. But man, some of those highlights are pretty scintillating. And he's definitely someone, I think, on their opening night of the season, that's when I want to be watching.
Yeah, I'll be there in Vegas. So you should come out. Let's do it. You get the Gators in Arizona. We've done an Arizona video. We've talked about Florida. And then, you get to watch Villanova versus BYU, which will be the AJ intro game. It should be a lot of fun. The most productive player in this class is Cam Boozer. And Cam Boozer has gotten forgotten about in a lot of respects, I think, because he is not quite the same NBA prospect that Darryn Peterson and AJ are. And I think we will show why on the film, right? He is not quite as athletic. He's not quite as bursty. He's not quite as dynamic with the ball in his hands. At some point, though, again, production is production. The guy has been the 20-10 guy everywhere he's been. He has won 4 state championships in Florida. He won a high school national championship against these like national prep school teams. Just him, his brother, and then like a couple of good recruits who are on the roster, but are still all Florida kids, if nothing else. He won 3 Peach Jams, 15, 16, and 17. He won gold medals with USA Basketball. The guy has absolutely dominated every setting. And at some point, you'd expect that probably to continue, right? Like, it's college basketball. I have no reason to believe that Cam Boozer won't average 17 and 10. What that 17 and 10 looks like, I think, is an interesting question. And I think that's probably a good transition into the film. I'm a believer, but yeah, like, will it be Cooper Flagg game domination, or will it be kind of the bully buckets that make you a very productive, but not necessarily quite as winning a college player?
Yeah, what he does that isn't great for the NBA is something that I think a lot of college fans will really like, because how many times has there been really heralded front court players that have size, that have muscle, that have physicality, and then they're out there taking step back threes, and people are like, man, why don't these players just like leverage their size and their strength? And Boozer plays like what a lot of people would like to see from someone with that kind of frame. He is very much, like you said, a bully ball player, and I use that in a very complimentary setting. He is someone who knows how to leverage his size. Oh, got to switch, smaller player. I'm going to jab and go to my dominant hand and go and lay the ball in. I'm going to take contact and finish over top while getting to the foul line. A lot of this is great because he really knows how to actually leverage that size and leverage that physicality. The problem, if there is one, is I would say, like, because you watch a lot of these clips, even as he's making buckets, he's not creating a lot of separation. He is relying on that bully ball nature, on that physicality, on that strength. And I think that's where you're just like, will this run out against some different level of competition? You do see him get blocked all the time. And despite his great physical traits, his finishing around the rim, whether by the film, whether by the numbers, has not been very good. And there is just clip after clip after clip after clip of him struggling to finish through some contact around the rim, or just straight up getting blocked by much smaller, less athletic players. And if you're going to look at how does this guy get to like the 17, 18, 19 points a game, whatever, you're probably thinking, okay, he's got to have some easy ones around the rim. And he doesn't always get those easy ones. And then you look at a play like that one where he isn't able to create any level of separation. Here gets a bit of a switch. It's well defended. He just kind of throws up a bit of a grenade. Those are some of the problems as you kind of look at a lot of these clips really with a fine tooth comb, and you're like, okay, how is he scoring? How is he getting with? It's not a lot of like creating space, creating separation. It is a lot of physicality, strength, and the physicality, strength, size piece. That's like very high floor in my opinion. And when you said like, hey, this is a guy that I'd like easily could get 17 and 10, like, yeah, absolutely. I just think maybe some of the comparisons that are being made to more, I don't know, skilled, higher volume play creating forwards, I just don't know if I see that necessarily for Boozer. And it's one of those things that, like, even if he's like not the most efficient, not the like create the best looks for himself all the time, like Hawkeye, he could still be awesome. Like, I still love a lot of what we see from him. It's just, I will say, the more I watch, the lower the ceiling looks a little bit for me. And I just do wonder if he's not able to bully ball a bunch of ACC bigs. He also wasn't really able to create a lot of separation with speed or skill. So, you know, what does that start to look like? And and that for that reason, I think I have become, it's interesting. I think I'm probably a little bit less high on him than some, while also being like, this is like a surefire, efficient, really good player.
Yeah. So the one comp a lot of people made, especially once he committed to Duke, was Paolo Banchero. And I think that's sort of the easy guy to allude to when you say he doesn't have quite as much wiggle, right? Like, Paolo had a lot of the same like power and physical dominance, but he was a more dynamic, I think, shooter. He was a more dynamic like playmaker with the ball in his hands, like just a little twitchier. And that's why Paolo's a high level NBA player already. And that's why I think we wonder about Cam. Like, is Cam going to have that at some point in his bag? And if he doesn't, is he just like a great third or fourth option, going in the NBA? In college, I buy it 100%. And look, I think the other thing that will be interesting with Cam is so much of his career, really, he has never really played without Caden outside of like some USA basketball stuff. Like, Caden Boozer's a really, really excellent playmaking point guard. And from what I've gathered, Duke seems very intent on Caleb Foster being the point guard, who is much more of a scorer. And the guys around him, like Dame Sarr, and, obviously they'll have Isaiah Evans and Kamenia, who we'll talk about a little bit in next week's video. Look, there's not a ton of true like creation, like get others better type guys. And it sounds like they're going to run a lot of offense through Cam Boozer. I'm fascinated to see how that goes, because for as good as he has always played with an outstanding point guard in Caden Boozer. Caden Boozer is an outstanding AAU point guard, an outstanding high school point guard. I'm not sure Caleb Foster is. And I'm interested to see, like, does Caden play more than expected just to keep Cam smooth? Like, I don't know. It's a very interesting dynamic to watch. Again, we're splitting hairs here. This is a guy that I think we both agree is going to average like 15 and 8 if he has a bad year, and 20 and 12 if he has a good year, right? So like somewhere in between. But what does that mean for Duke's success? I think is an open question. And then the last guy we wanted to hit, and we'll hit him relatively quickly, is Nate Ament. Sorry to Louisville fans, Mikael Brown. We talked about some already. We'll continue to talk about him throughout the year. But Ament is, some people have called him the highest ceiling player in this class. That probably undersells the ceiling for Peterson and AJ. But you see the KD type stuff, like the long, smooth, shoot over anybody type of guy that NBA scouts, for good reason, can kind of salivate over.
Yeah, I mean, to hear people talking about him as potentially the highest ceiling guy, I think that probably speaks to just like he's a little bit not as good as the other guys right now, but like, look, he can also make tough shots, and I think it is pretty easy to look at Ament and say, okay, like there's the Kevin Durant comparison. Some of the way he just has those like split on the baseline and put up pull-up jumpers, like looks a lot like KD even now, and I'm sure that's something that Rick Barnes really tried to sell him on, and there's definitely those great flashes for sure. And I think the question for me is just, as you watch all these clips, is he using his dribble to get anywhere? Is he putting any pressure on the rim, or is everything just going away from the basket? And it's obviously great that he can make shots, very important skill, but man, whenever he saw any level of contact and guys got underneath him and made him feel uncomfortable, it started to look pretty ugly at times. And then the question is, okay, is he going to come to college and be someone who is able to take 8 threes off the dribble a game and hit those at a really good percentage while also, playing in the mid range? But like, how can you play that style and be good enough that you're a winning player? Because I just think he's going to be someone who struggles defensively with size, probably struggles a little bit on the glass with size. When he's got physical defenders around him, he's not going to be able to do anything going towards the rim. And it's like, okay, if this is suddenly someone who's only shooting 33% from three and 41% from mid range and is not putting pressure on the rim, suddenly that becomes a player that is not just maybe not the most efficient, but doesn't seem like the most Tennessee type player. And how do they handle that as well? But I think on the upside, you look at it, like, what has Tennessee been missing the last couple of years? It's been someone who could really create on their own. You think about even some of their high scores recently, like you think about like Dalton Knecht, where they just ran him off 100 screens again last year, just like running guys off 100 screens, trying to get them open for 3-point looks. They didn't have anyone with size who could kind of create on their own and get to even an open jumper. So you definitely see why this could like really help. But there's also moments where you're like, this is a player that does not look particularly ready for high-level physicality and defense.
And he played in he stayed at his more local high school. He played private school basketball in Virginia. Yes, because he was a top 5 prospect. They played in some of these national games, and some of that film is, that you saw is from those settings. But he did not play the same schedule as the Petersons of the world, the Debansas of the world. How that impacts him will be interesting, right? Look, I think at the end of the day, going to Tennessee was a great decision for him physically, because there may not be a better program in the country at putting weight on guys and putting good weight on guys than Tennessee. Basketball-wise, he gave himself incredible opportunity, right? Because they don't have a ton of scoring outside of Gillespie. He will get an opportunity to be the guy playing the system that was great for KD. But I also think he put himself in a higher downside situation, right? Like if he had went to Duke to play with Cam Boozer and he is a more of like an off-ball shooter, or Louisville was in there for quite some time and they're like really just letting him be a shooter with all these high-level guards, that might have been an easier year of college for him than what he'll face at Tennessee. Now, it might be good for him long-term to get pushed, right? To deal with being the number 1 guy on the scouting report, to deal with SEC athleticism and physicality, to have to get those on-ball reps. But will there be some bumps? Probably, right? And how he responds to those, I think, will be really interesting to watch.
And that's where this is kind of the first guy where I also I don't want to say wonder about the team fit. Like you mentioned, there's Barnes had pretty good success with Kevin Durant, and I'm not saying that Ament is the same player as Dalton Knecht or Chaz Lanier, but when the 2 best offensive players they had over the last couple of years, they utilized them by saying, hey, go stand under the rim, and then we're going to set these off-ball screens for you that you're going to sprint off of and then catch and immediately put up shots. And one, that's something that he didn't do a lot because he had the ball in his hands too. And two, I'm just like not entirely sure that that's the most efficient way to use him or use any kind of great wing score. So I also do think that Tennessee's offense will have to bend from the last couple of years and get back a little bit more to what Barnes is doing with Katie. And that becomes interesting. But I think just when we look at the other guys, looking at Debansa, looking at Peterson, looking at Boozer, looking at Mikael Brown that you talked about, like I'm not really concerned about the offensive scheme fit, where I just like don't know if I've loved a lot of the way that Tennessee has kind of tried to leverage their stars the last couple of years. And now I'm just going to be interested what they do, because this is, again, very different than the veteran low major up transfer who can knock down shots off the catch. Ament is obviously very different than those players, but it's just been a little while since we've seen Barnes utilize a guy like this, and it becomes interesting for that reason.
Big picture, we like all these guys, right? Like we think these guys can be really good players. I think most of them will probably be all conference level players. Some might be all Americans. But I think it was important, and I think it was a valuable exercise to sit down and say, hey, look, like these are the potential flaws. These are the things that are going to get challenged, because if we're seeing it on tape and, I don't want to say quick skims, but like just it was not, we were not scouting a college game to see this stuff. I was not an NBA scout going with a fine tooth comb through some of this stuff the way that some of these people are, to have watched them at, Adidas and Nike camps and things like that, and seeing like, hey, like these are the things that people are going to exploit. And so they're going to get challenged on it, and it'll be fascinating to see how they all respond. We're excited about it. The season cannot come soon enough, because these guys are going to be a joy to watch. And I think I have a chance to make college basketball this season really, really fun, because, the level of talent I think is unbelievably high. I can't wait for it. I know you can't wait, Fawcett. We will be back next week with another episode, still working through this 2025 high school class. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, check out everything at Basket Under Review, best place for independent college hoops coverage, the podcasts, the written content, the Discord, which is a lot of fun, especially this time of year, Ken Palm out and all that. And so we're excited, and we will see you all next week.